welcome back to another Kerbal Space Program episode. Today we're going to be doing a spacewalk and a flyby of the Mun. So the first thing you want to do is go to your astronaut complex and upgrade it. You should have the funds for it from the last time we played, and then you're going to hop over to mission control and grab Explorer Kerbin. Make sure it's the one about spacewalking. It'll be in the details. Then we're going to go ahead and grab this TD-12 decoupler at launch site mission, and then another small one like a parachute mission that can be easily done. We need a little bit more funding to upgrade a few more things. This rocket's going to be basically the same thing we built last time, but there'll be a little extra fuel onto it. So go ahead and start with the MK1 command pod like we did last time. Put that heat shield on there, and go ahead and slap on that decoupler. Now we're going to do the we're going to do the Science Boy Jr. first, my bad, and throw the rest of the experiments on there because we are going to be going into HKO or high Kerbin orbits to grab a little extra science so we can unlock a few more tech nodes and go ahead and get ourselves a little bit farther along. Now just use a FT400 tank followed by an FT100 tank and the Terrier units, and then go ahead and slap on a decoupler after that. And we're going to follow it up with 3 of the FT400s and 1 of the FT200 tanks with a swivel on the bottom of it. This is going to be pretty much the same thing we used to get into orbit the first time, with a little more fuel so we have some play around room. Go ahead and make sure your staging is correct. Now I'm going to slap a T12 decoupler on the very bottom of that swivel and group them together. If you don't have that decoupler mission like I do at the launch site, don't worry about it. Another little tip too is when you're in that mission control, if you can't find the missions you want, just decline them without accepting them, and it will cycle the missions. You won't get a penalty. But we're going to pretty much do the same flight pattern we did last time. Fly straight up in the air, about 50 to 70 meters a second. We're going to go ahead and start slowly tipping to the 90-degree marker. We want to try to keep it as close as we can to be on that line. Since we're just kind of doing a quick orbit and back, it doesn't have to be perfect. But later when we do our MUN launch, we want to ride that line, have that little box below, say about 90 to 91 degrees. You want to be as close to that as you can. But for this flight, we're just going to fly up to where we're about to the 10K mark, slowly turning over to catch that 45 degree. Cut back the throttle just a hair. Oh, actually, this is the heavier rocket. You want to go ahead and have it full throttled up and just kind of keep going that way until you hit the 55-second mark, and then just follow the prograde marker all the way up until you hit the 80K mark. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail when we do the MUN launch and explain a couple of tricks you can do and things you should not do when flying these, and a good way to kind of test out what you're doing. Either way, now that we're at 80K, we're going to make a maneuver node right at the top of the orbit there and just drag out the prograde marker until we're in a circular orbit. It doesn't have to be perfect. As long as both sides are over 70K, you should be good to go. And then we're going to go ahead and just warp up to the node itself and go ahead and do our burn, just like we did last time to get into orbit. The only difference here is once we get into orbit, we're going to do a quick spacewalk, just an LKO to grab a little bit of science. Again, we won't get a whole bunch, but we'll get a decent amount. And then we're going to go ahead and burn prograde to bring the top of our orbit up to over 300,000 meters, or 300 kilometers, I guess, above the surface of Kerbin. That way you're in the high Kerbin orbit area. Go ahead and warp up to that area. We're going to do all of our experiments, and then we're going to do our spacewalk. Now, once you do the spacewalk, when Jeb's close enough to the units, that's why you put them right by the door, you can go ahead and right-click on them and say Take Data on a console. It's going to be the box button or the X button. Same thing, same way you do an EVA report when you did it in the beginning of the game, where you open up to, do a crew report or whatever. Same button to do it. And then once you go ahead and collect all the data, because we're going to lose all this stuff here in a second, go ahead and burn retrograde until you're between 35 and 40,000. And then we're going to go ahead and warp down. Now, you see me here, I'm actually doing an EVA report just under the 70-kilometer mark. That's because we're in the upper atmosphere. We're not technically in orbit, so you get a little extra science for that. You do want to make sure you do that as quick as possible, because if you're out of your ship too long, when you start getting into the atmosphere too much, your Kerbal will burn up and game over. Either way, if you went ahead and got all that done, just go ahead and follow the retrograde marker, and be sure to decouple sooner than I did. I was having some issues with my video recording software, and I was in a different screen at the time, and you can see what happened. Luckily, everything survived. Well, the capsule survived. That's the important part. And then we're just going to go ahead and let gravity and the atmosphere do the rest of the work for us. Just going to go ahead and speed this part up because it's kind of a long descent. Those parachutes were a little overkill, but I had done them for that contract. So once we get down to the water, we're going to hop back over to the Space Center and we're going to go ahead and see what science we got. Looks like we 120 science. That's not great, but it's enough. Well, almost enough, actually. We actually do fall a little bit short, and we're going to do a quick mission. I'll explain that in a second. We need to go to mission control, and we want to grab Explore the Mun. Now, this is just a flyby mission. We're not landing. We'll be doing that in the next episode. We want to get a couple of things and upgrade the R&D building so we can do surface samples because it makes it worth it. I'm going to go ahead and grab a couple of contracts until I have about 320,000 credits, give or take. You want to be right around there because we need to upgrade the VAB and the launch pad, which is 275,000 altogether in stock game. So I'm just going to go ahead and pick a couple contracts that I can kind of do in flight, like, scientific data around Kerbin, test X engine at launch pad, blah, 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 stuff like that. Just enough to where the advances give us enough credits to upgrade both of those. Think of it as like a short-term loan. And later in the game, if it's something that you end up not being able to do, if you decline it, you take that penalty for whatever it is. But as long as you have enough money after the fact, it's not a big deal. It doesn't really affect your reputation too much. It does a little bit, but not a bunch. I would recommend doing it all the time to where you get a bunch of money and then, decline the contracts. Just enough advance to get us to about 320,000 so we can upgrade the rest of the stuff we need, and it will allow us to build a slightly bigger rocket, which will make the Mun trip a lot easier. Anyways, you see, I just kind of grabbed about 4 missions or so with the Mun mission, and I grabbed a few things I can actually do on the way, like one of the scientific data around Kerbin. Now, you won't get any science points from it since we've already gotten the data from LKO and HKO, but the contract will still be finalized whether we get science from it or not, as long as we run the experiment. Then we're going to go ahead and pop over to we're going to upgrade both these buildings first. I'm going to pop over to R&D, and we want to grab fuel systems and then the construction. The construction is the second down on the 4th tree, and then the fuel system is the 3rd down on the 5th tree. That will give us the fuel line feed, which is going to help us out for the staging we're about to set up, which I'll show you in a moment. And we're going to realize we're a little short to get the construction time, which we're going to want because of the struts. So I'm just going to go ahead and build a really small hopper here. I'm going to slap a probe core onto it. You'll see me do it right here. It's because I'm going to have Bob do this next mission. Bob, being a scientist, cannot use SAS on career mode until he's fully upgraded, unless they've changed that. But he can repeat the Mr. U and the Science Junior experiments, and that's why we're taking him. We're gonna kind of do the Science Junior in a couple spots real fast. We're just gonna use a small booster and shoot up into the left instead of the right, so we land in the field next to the KSC. Now, once you leave the KSC area, you're in a different biome. We've already been to the water, so we won't get a lot of gains from it. So I'm just gonna run the experiment, see what data I can pick up. Go ahead and launch, have SAS on because that probe core will take care of the SAS, and then we're just going to slowly come back down, and we're going to go ahead and grab some science from once we hit the ground, and it will be just enough to get that node we need. Now, you notice that all the experiments kind of went off. Since I upgraded the VAB, you can make quick action groups, which is either 1 through 10, well, sorry, 1 through 0 on PC, or if you hold the left bumper down and then hit right on the diagonal pad, I believe, or it might just be right on the diagonal pad. It will open up this little wheel that says 1 through 10. Those are your action groups. I just attached them to abort real fast, so once I hit the abort key, all of the experiments ran. It just makes things a little bit faster. But we got enough science to go ahead and get that construction node, so let's go ahead and unlock it real fast. Let's kind of check out what else we're going to need here. I'll show you what we need to upgrade after we get back from the Mun flyby to do the actual landing. But how about we go ahead and get that rocket built? So we're going to pop over to the VAB here in just a second, and then we are going to get our rocket built. So this will be a little bit different than the ones before. It's the same command pod with the single parachute. I put the secondary parachutes just to kind of help slow myself down. A full heat shield and a decoupler. And then we're going to do an FT400 tank with a Terrier. And then we're going to do another FT400 tank with another Terrier. We're giving this a 3rd stage, so once we get into orbit, we have enough fuel to go to the Mun and come back. Now below, we're going to put 2 of the FT800 tanks and a swivel on the bottom of it. And then we're going to use the 2 side decouplers we picked up to make a set of boosters. Also, don't forget to put your science equipment on there like I almost did. It happens, but I always make a checklist and double check I have everything before I leave. That way you make sure you have your parachutes and anything else you might possibly need. The only thing I would change about this is I would possibly add, I would definitely add solar panels and more battery packs than I do. Um, I've been playing this game for a little bit longer, so I'm able to fly without SAS. And when you use SAS to hold a point, it definitely burns up that electric charge. Now, when you use the engine, most engines, they'll generate some of the electric charge back, which is how we did this mission. But I'd go ahead and recommend just slapping those solar panels on there. Now, we're going to use 3 Terror engines for this bottom stage. Usually people use the Reliance for boosters because they have a better thruster weight and they weigh less, but we want the gimbal control. That's kind of why we're doing this. Need to make sure we have these strutted so they don't go flopping around as soon as we launch off the pad. I'm going to put a fuel line in from the outer tanks to the inner. You have to start on the outer tank and go to the inner tank. If you do it the other way, it's going to drain the incorrect way. Now what this is going to do is drain all the fuel out of the side booster tanks before touching the center rocket tank, which means when you decouple those 2 units, you'll have a full tank of fuel in both of those FT800 rockets. In fact, this rocket is a little over-engineered, so there's a little bit of wiggle room, just in case you kind of don't get your ascent correctly or you have to make some adjustments once you're in orbit. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and make sure our staging is all correct. Those little red pillar launch pads, I always hook them up with my rockets. Most people will do those secondary, so you fire the rocket and then release. As long as you have a good enough thrust to weight ratio, you can slap all 4 of those together in the same stage as when the rockets go off, so your rockets fire off and you just start lifting immediately. You can go either way on it. That's kind of a personal preference for people. It's not that big of a deal if you want to do it the quote unquote proper way where you hit the rockets and then you decouple it. Either way works fine. Anyways, we're gonna go ahead and launch straight up to about 70 meters a second and slowly start to pitch towards 90-degree mark like we have been doing. It's basically the same thing as we're just going to get into orbit real fast, some LKO, we just have a little bit more power. Now on the left side of the screen, you'll see that 2 of the fuel tanks are draining faster than the 3rd one. Don't worry, that 3rd one will have full fuel once we detach these. Just kind of keep your eye on that, or you can look at the actual thrusters on the back of the ship, and once those burn out, go ahead and hit the stage button and separate them like I did. Now you have a full tank of fuel on that single engine, the main engine, so you can push up the extra weight because again we have that extra engine and extra tank on this ship. We're just going to burn to about 55 seconds away from the top of the orbit and then follow the prograde marker like we have been doing. Now once we get up into orbits, we need to make a maneuver node. We got to make one here first to get our orbit. So go ahead and do that. Now I'm going to show you how to select the MUN as a target and actually get an encounter. It doesn't always work the first time. Don't get frustrated. Sometimes you need to remake the maneuver node a couple of times. Don't just sit there and fight with the same maneuver node forever. You'll just get frustrated. Trust me, it's just a lot better to delete it and start over. We're going to go ahead and do our burn and get ourselves into a nice LKO around 80K. And again, if it's not perfect is not too bad, but you want to get this one on that 90-degree mark if you can because it's at the same level as the MUN. So we're going to go ahead and zoom out. We're going to click on the MUN and set as target. Now you see where those 2 little lines are? Those are kind of like the intersection areas. I always start my maneuver node right there and then just go ahead and pull prograde out until the top of your orbit intersects with the MUNs. Now you're going to see here, I'm going to get an encounter pretty quickly right off the bat. You may or may not. In fact, I'm doing a slingshot orbit, which I'll show you in a second. But once you get the encounter, you'll see the 2 little white triangles. They'll eventually meet each other, and then you'll see like a little ghost image of the planet. That means you got it. Now we're going to aim to crash into the planet because that first set of the first air Terror engine, the FT400, we're going to be crashing that into the planet so we don't leave space junk. So just go ahead and fly up to your fly up to your node and then go ahead and do your burn. Now, once you get your burn done, I'm going to show you. We're going to kind of decouple this and let it kind of float away because if you just decouple it and you throttle, you'll knock that stage we're currently using out of the orbit you had it set it for. We want it to crash into the Mun so it doesn't leave space debris. Again, once you get towards the end of the burn, just pull your throttle down and lightly throttle up, and you'll see in just a second we have a nice collision course with the Mun. That means that rocket's going to hit the Mun, blow itself up, and we won't have to worry about it. Now, once that happens, go ahead and decouple it. Don't throttle away. Go ahead and use time warp to go forward a little bit. I have to go ahead and grab some data from around Kerbin for one of my contracts. And then once I get that, I'm going to go ahead and just time warp up a bit. And then we're going to make a correction maneuver in deep space between the Mun and Kerbin. See, I kind of click on the little blue line about halfway through, and I'm just going to pull the retrograde marker back just a little bit to where we're, up anywhere between 30 and 50, give or take. The closer you are, the easier it is to do a pulsar landings, and there's a high above the moon and low above the Mun. So we're just going to go ahead and get this lined up and do our burn. Now, if you overshoot this a little bit or you're right before it, it's no big deal. These super tiny burns is 4 meters a second. You don't have to be exactly spot on. In fact, if you saw, I just opened up my engine menu and brought my thrust limiter way down so I didn't overshoot it, and then I'm hitting like quarter throttle and just watching it come over and get a nice close encounter to the Mun. Then we're going to make a maneuver node. Now we're going to try to make our periapsis a bit lower than the top of our orbit, purely because we want to get data from high above and low, or close to. The close to mark is around, I want to say 30 kilometers, give or take. See our little slingshot. So we're going to get data from both sides. Now we're going to run every experiment but the Science Boy Junior since we don't have two of them. When we come back later, when we do our landing, we'll be able to get it high above the Mun. But just go ahead and do your retrograde burn like I'm doing here, and right until it kind of matches up. And again, we want to make sure we're between 20 and 30 kilometers. Too low, you can possibly crash into stuff. The Mun's pretty forgiving. But we're just going to hop out, do our EVA report, do our crew report, do all of the reports since we're in a new area around the Mun. And then we're going to reboard the ship after collecting all the data. And then we're going to go ahead and time warp up over to the higher point of the orbit. Again, that's going to be a different section, so we'll be able to repeat the experiments and get a little bit more data out of it when we do that. Now, once we get to this point, I'm going to kind of show you how to get back to Kerbin. There's a certain spot you want to burn at. You want to basically burn to where your ship is going to be shooting like the opposite direction of the Mun's orbit. So like let's say the Mun is going clockwise, you want to be going counterclockwise, so you shoot back to Kerbin, which I'll go ahead and you'll see in the maneuver note how I do that. But real quick, we're just going to run the rest of our science experiments right here and go ahead and do that Science Boy Junior. Again, make sure you collect all of the data, because once those units are gone, you can never get the science back. And again, you just right click on it and hit take data. So once we get all that done, and also make sure you get your EVA report and do the crew report trick that we did last episode, just so you make sure you can get both of those crew reports. Now, once we get to this point, we're going to make a maneuver node pretty much just in front of us. You'll kind of see on the map here in a second where I set the maneuver node, but you want it to pretty much be somewhere around the spot that sits between the Mun and Kerbin. So wherever the Mun's at, if the space between Mun and the Kerbin, you want to make sure you do your node right around there. You'll see it here, right here. I'm basically the spot facing Kerbin. I'm just going to burn backwards. You want it to be kind of how mine is. If it's all off-centered and weird, go ahead and move it around a little bit. We want our periapsis to be anywhere between 35 and 40,000. We're going to basically be doing some aero braking, and since we have a little extra fuel, we're going to use that to bleed off a little bit of the speed as well. Just set the maneuver node and just kind of move it around and adjust it until you get to where your periapsis is about 35,000. Now, once we do this burn, towards the end of the burn, like I told you before, you want to cut your throttle and very lightly throttle it up. I delete my maneuver node because, again, you'll be on the prograde marker more than likely, so you can just lock it to prograde. And then you can delete the maneuver node and just watch it. Just if you're on console, just click the stick and highlight the top of it. If you're on PC, if you right-click the periapsis, it will stay up for you, and just lightly throttle until you're about the 35-ish mark. Now, you're going to notice that I'm actually a little bit higher than that because I was trying to wrap up this contract. So if you don't have a contract like I do, just go ahead and put it about that 35K mark. That's a pretty safe entry area to come into Kerbin's atmosphere without, burning yourself up entirely. So just remember you want to be around that 35, 40K mark. Too high, as if it's over 70 kilometers, you won't be able to aero brake. And if it's too low, you could potentially come in too fast and crash, and then it's mission over. If you only get like, 50K-ish, it will still work. You just don't slow down as fast. Sometimes you'll have to do a couple of passes around Kerbin to bleed off all the speed to land. But we're just going to go ahead and warp up to the point where we're right about the atmosphere, and we're going to lock in that retrograde marker, which you should be able to do with Jeb if you've been following the series. Now, sorry about that. My camera was doing some weird thing here. It's been having issues with time warp. But once we get to, the atmosphere curve, we're just going to kind of let gravity and everything take over. Again, since I'm a little bit higher, I'm going to use the rest of the fuel because this thing was way over engineered to kind of slow down a bit just to bring the top of my orbit down so I don't have to spend as much time spinning around the planet since I went for that higher periapsis to hopefully get that contract wrapped up. Again, it doesn't always work out, and you will run into situations to where the contracts are either buggy and won't work, or they're just really hard to do and you just don't quite get it exactly the way they want it to. Don't be discouraged. It's a big issue. There's a lot of like really oddball contracts that I recommend avoiding, like the space around, Kerbin or plant a flag on X planet. Like those are good ones to grab, but like the weird ones where they want you to test like a solid rocket, booster at X distance in the air, like those have a lot of issues. And the precise, like the ones where it's like, oh, take a temperature scan from this precise area, those ones are more pain than they're worth. So I'd recommend just try to stick to missions that you can easily do until you get a little bit more comfortable with the game. But now that we're over a new biome, I'm just going to grab a little bit of science here real fast. You saw I just kind of popped out of the capsule and did a quick EVA report. And then once I land, I'm going to do another quick report just to kind of get a little extra science. You don't have to do this, but if you're here, why not? Now, if you landed in the water for some reason, you won't be able to replicate this. But if you land in a different area, you're good to go. But that kind of wraps up the mission. So I hope you guys learned something today. If there's anything I can do to make it easier for you guys to follow along, feel free to let me know in the comments. Again, my name was Tony. I want to thank you guys again for watching. And next time we come together, we will be going to the Mun and landing. We're doing a direct ascent. And then I think I'm going to show you guys how to do Apollo and Rendezvous when we do Minmus because it's a little bit easier to learn on. Again, if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to let me know in the comments. And if you want to go ahead and like and subscribe to this video, that helps me out a lot. Or if you didn't enjoy it, go ahead and give me a thumbs down. It will help me improve. But again, that wraps up this video. Stay tuned for next time when we actually go land on the Mun. I'm also going to start live streaming on Twitch, so I'll leave that link in the description if you want to check it out. Hopefully, I'll see at least one of you guys there.